Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my husband and co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, exciting news. I am here to unveil, ta-da, the Uncertainty Playbook. Written by Jeffrey Tumlin and Cindi Baldi, it's 14 strategies for work success in a chaotic world. We know that most people aren't very good with uncertainty, and so we combed through the research and ran some experiments in our own work and came up with these 14 strategies that we think could be really helpful for helping you all survive uncertainty and coming out on top. If you're interested in buying the book, it's available on our websites, managementmuse.com and ondemandleadership.com. You can get 20% off if you use the promo code Playbook20. That will get you 20% off and free shipping. So stop on by, and we're wishing you some good reading. Hey, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, my co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin. And today we are going to talk about
why it's urgent to get urgency right.
There you go. That's it. That's our topic for today.
That's right. In the intellectual forefather of this is John Kotter, who famously, before there was an internet, put out a viral article in Harvard Business Review about the 8 stages of organizational change, where step 1 is create a sense of urgency. And then 2 years later, after his article went viral, wrote a book with a one-word title, Urgency. And in the first chapter said, I had to write this book because in my 8-step model, most organizations never get past step 1. And they don't actually generate enough urgency. And so this discussion is about why urgency is so hard to get right.
And so hard to create.
Yeah. Because typically people don't share the same sense of urgency. And so I give an example. It's one of my favorite ones of all time. There was a organization we work with. This is a true story. I don't know if I've ever told you this. There's an organization we work with, and the maintenance and the HR departments were like, look, we've got cameras, but they don't show everything in the organization. And they're not as high quality. But to basically redo the whole organization with better cameras and get full coverage was going to take their maintenance department offline for like a week or whatever and cost a lot of money. And if you do it outsourced, it was going to be double the price. And so basically the senior leadership kept saying, no, we're okay. We're fine with what we've got. And then one weekend, this is a true story, somebody on a Saturday late afternoon when it was really quiet walked in, unscrewed flat screens, and walked out with the flat screens, like broad daylight, carted off their flat screens from the waiting rooms, like 2 of them, huge flat screens. It just, walked out with the toolkit, the whole 9 yards. And then immediately after that, of course, what happens, now we're going to get the better cameras, we're going to get it monitored and all, And so it was before the theft, there was an urgency disconnect. And the maintenance person and the HR person, both of them were like, look, we got a problem, we don't have this coverage. But the senior leadership didn't see the urgency. And it took the changing of
And so was it actual theft, or was it like the maintenance person who went in with a screwdriver?
No, actual theft. This was at the start of football season. That's the speculation. It was at the start of football season.
Oh, so they wanted a better TV.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah, true story. Yeah, true story. And so what's important about this topic is for us to look at the 2 difficult parts of urgency. One is where we don't agree, and then the other is where we agree. And they both throw off very unusual problems. And this first problem, where we don't agree, is we're often taken by surprise. And we try to basically, our first instinct is some version of, I can't believe you don't understand this. I can't believe you don't see this. And that is the worst possible way to try to get somebody to change their mind. And so a more thoughtful approach is to do a reality check about what you're feeling and to actually see how many other people share that view.
So how are you doing the reality check?
The most common way is people go to usually it starts with you talking to one or two people who you trust and who are close to you on this issue, meaning they have some kind of understanding of it. But eventually you need to work your way out to other people who maybe you're a little more distant from.
Right, because the people who are close to you are likely to not, they're likely to pull their punches if they do disagree with you. Or and just don't see the urgency.
Yeah, and the people you're closest to are more likely to be similar to you, and they're more likely to have similar beliefs and so forth. And so there's a lot of reasons why getting a little bit further afield can help you road test if you have the right urgency level. Because sometimes we need to persuade other people to raise the urgency up. And that's what John Cotter was saying. Like in an organizational change, you need a critical mass of people believing that there's enough urgency for us to get through all the pain of the organizational change. But sometimes we're off and we need to be brought back down, because what we're wanting to do, or what we're wanting to bring up to the boss, or what we think is a big issue may actually not be that big a deal. And getting some of that alternate feedback may help us kind of tamp down on that. It's been a couple of years, but we worked in a company where two senior people left. It was the basic CIO, and then the CFO left. And one of the people we coached, another senior leader, basically was like, we got to go to the CEO. Like, this is like, everybody's leaving. Something's wrong with this company. We have to stop the bleeding, all the senior leaders. And what she didn't know is that she was about to get promoted. Like, this was it'd be the worst possible time for her to be putting up a red alert. And that the two people who left for better jobs that the company couldn't match. And all of that was not, in the CIO's case, that wasn't disclosed. And so nobody knew that.
Well, and even the disclosures are hard, because a lot of times people, if they're leaving an organization because of the organization, they still don't want to get into that. And they will give another reason about how, for some explanation, their life somewhere else is. So, I mean, I think it's not uncommon for somebody to take that and maybe not give it its full credibility and be worried that there is actually a problem.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I think that happens all the time. Is that people, I mean, I'll just say it with a little exaggeration, but people lie during their exit interviews.
Right, because they don't want to blow up.
That's right.
The old relationship, they just wanted to get out of it. Because, like, by the time you're exiting, you're like, this is no longer my circus. Yeah, that's right. Hopefully they did whatever they could while they worked, but they put in their 2 cents. Yeah. Nothing was done. They're gone. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of times people leave for interpersonal reasons, I think, are probably double what they actually say. Just based on our experience talking with people. And then when they leave their exit interview, they'll say, well, my husband got a job, my wife got a job. I needed to stabilize my schedule so that I could work with the kids. They're going into school. And so that becomes the reason. Right. Where it's basically, that's not the reason. No. And it's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Any of you nerds out there looking for a dissertation topic, the amount of deception, I don't even know how you'd study it, but the amount of deception in exit interviews I don't even know how you'd study it.
It would be very hard to
Yeah,
study because we've done exit interviews as a third party, which does open up people to be more honest, but even then, like having it documented really throws people because they really don't want to.
Yeah.
They don't want the fight. I mean, that's why they're leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Anyway, nerds, if you're up for it, you have to figure out how to square the circle where people are actually not giving the reasons they're leaving during an exit interview in many cases. But if you can figure that out, I would read that study. I would think that study would get a little bit of play too. But back to the topic at hand. And so there's often a negotiation between the amount of urgency people have. Our friend, the late, great Jefferson Howe, another one of the guys that we're close to, we did a series of podcasts with him a few years ago.
Oh, people love his stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Recently
deceased.
Yeah. But he famously said, after being a general for many years, a Marine Corps general, that the difference between military life and civilian life is, in civilian life, asking somebody to do something is just the beginning of a very long and drawn out negotiation, compared to in the military as a general.
I think he said that on one of the podcasts too.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. On one of our podcasts with him. Yeah, could be. But when we feel like something is urgent, the situation is desperate, we have to do something, our tendency to persuade is to just add more cowbell and keep repeating, like, can't you see this is a huge deal? And a lot of times people can't see, and we have to make a more compelling case, and we have to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong, and that we may actually be more sensitive in a inaccurate way than they are to what's going on.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the first kind of distortion of urgency, is we almost always believe people should be feeling at our level. And so it's very hard for us to absorb when they're not. And when we don't sense a great urgency, somebody who does, it's very hard for them to persuade us.
Well, and I think also too is that it's not as simple as just like, there's a difference with where you sit in the urgency that you feel, but it's also, you'd mentioned this previously in another episode, that sometimes just where we are in life makes, like, we're just in an unstable position in life. Yeah. And that can make us more sensitive to this sense of urgency.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then there's the other case, which is where when
everybody agrees.
Yeah.
But usually by the time everybody agrees, the place is literally on fire. Because it is really hard to actually instill a sense of urgency in a large group of people. And so, like, the data has to be very compelling, which means it's in your face and it's, can be pretty dire.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would like it to not be that way. We'd like to create a sense of urgency before we get to that point. But oftentimes, by the time everybody's on board with an over sense of urgency.
Yeah. It was a slow build up. Here we had a place that we work was having a slow bleed. And then some of the people who saw the bleed first, same, classic what we just talked about, they were unable to convince the rest of the management team. And so by the time steps had to be taken, it was a lot bigger than it might have otherwise been. And then you have to be careful at that point that you don't overcorrect. Because now you have, it's like, I forget the old saying, but basically, nothing is more problematic than a new convert, right? Like somebody who all of a sudden is a true believer. And so to then have your whole, now boom, all of a sudden you have your whole leadership team in agreement that the situation is dire. And so there's a tendency to overcorrect. And we saw a lot of that. I mean, we saw that. We had a place that we worked during COVID. COVID's also a good example of urgency, right?
It is.
Like we were in probably at the time of COVID, maybe 11 different companies, maybe 12, something like that. Sound about right? Mm-hmm. And
where we were going physically, yeah.
Yeah, they each had a different response to COVID. And in one of the places that we worked, the senior leaders all early perceived this as a dire crisis. And so they implemented gargantuan, the organization was rightly sized and then COVID hit. And so they cut, I think it was like 15%, like headcount.
Yeah.
And by the way, they were healthcare. And so they cut at the beginning of COVID, 15%. And shortly after they cut, the government started giving money. And so they got 15% less money than they would have otherwise.
Right. And then they needed the labor.
And then they were on the back foot playing catch up because they were understaffed at a time when, once the vaccine started rolling out, the market was red hot. When everybody's in alignment that the situation is dire, you have to be careful not to overcorrect.
Right. It's like everybody standing on the starting line and ready to go as soon as the gun goes off versus, doing it in waves, I guess.
Yeah, there's a guy I used to read a lot who wrote a book probably 20 years ago called The Pentagon's New Map, Thomas Barnett. And he said, which made an impression on me, the greater the shock, or if to use our lingo, the greater the urgency, the more follow-on changes. And so he used as an example 9/11. 9/11 was a shock to the system. And so then you have, no more curbside check-in, federalizing all of the security workers at airports,
no
can't
shoes.
carry liquid, I just
take out your shoes, I mean.
Yeah. Create a Department of Homeland Security, war in Afghanistan. You have all of these consequences that flew off of that single destabilizing event that created a huge sense of urgency. And so in our correlates, we think about organizations. And a lot of the things that put brakes on organizations moving very fast, to basically prevents organizations from moving fast and breaking things, are the people inside. Yeah. And the people are like, wait a minute, why are we doing, wait a minute.
A little friction is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, because like the first group that you were talking about, the first organization, what they did made sense. They were looking at, oh my gosh, we're having to shut down all these services. Yep. There's no reason to really expect that the government would cough up a whole bunch of extra money. I mean, it was a novel situation. We hadn't had a pandemic in 100 years.
Yeah.
And so, what they did was logical. It just bit them. Where, sometimes the friction actually makes you slow down, where enough information then comes in that you can reassess what's on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. They just made a bad call. But part of the reason they made the bad call is
they were actually able to move that fast. This particular organization moves, it's very flat, so it moves very fast.
Yeah.
And that's oftentimes really helpful, but this time it got them.
Yeah. 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 I think it was one of your work boyfriends, Rao and Sutton out of Stanford. I think they wrote a book called Friction or Friction.
And when he says boyfriends, they're not actually my boyfriends. They're just like people I really, really love to read their stuff. And I just find their stuff very helpful.
Yeah. Yes. But anyway, it's the basic idea is you need a little bit of friction, but not a lot. And everybody focuses on the friction being a problem, which it is, except when there's none and you're moving too fast.
Right.
And you're able to, like, go back to the example of the company that cut 15%, healthcare company cut 50% at the start of COVID. Had they been a little bit slower, they would have realized within 45 days, the government was basically going to pay them to keep all their people on. And they would have had to lay off nobody. And that, which by the way, those were people that they would go on and desperately try to rehire a year later.
Right. Because there was nothing wrong with them. They just.
No. And their company wasn't bigger than it needed to be.
Right.
Just everything stopped in COVID with the, elective surgeries, and you ain't even seeing a doctor in many cases. And so it's a good example of this idea.
Hello, musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
Love to get the executives together of organizations. We do 3 parts. We'll get you together for about 3.5 hours, and we'll do 1 part, what's hot at the company, what's going on that we need to talk about. Part 2, we'll do an elective topic, something relevant to your managers, dispute resolution, time management, stress management, burnout, prevention, whatever's going on in the organization. Then part 3, a series of discussion, questions, and exercises designed to deepen the ties and improve the communication. What do you get out of these sessions, these group sessions? You get better communication, increased performance, and a deeper sense of trust and facilitation between the most important people of your company. Want to do it? So do we. OnDemandLeadership.com. OnDemandLeadership.com. We're in our 8th year doing these executive group sessions in multiple companies. They started the first time we offered and they haven't stopped. Because if you're not doing sessions like this, your people are off doing a million different things, and it's scattered and fragmented. There's always a reason to not get together. Invest 3.5 hours a few times a year. We'll show you productivity gains. OnDemandLeadership.com, OnDemandLeadership.com. Call us.
I think also it's sometimes it's really frustrating when you feel that urgency and nothing is moving.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that might be, to some degree, like help you like sort of talk yourself down from getting frustrated. Is okay, it's not moving at the pace that you want, but here's this new piece of information, and it would have been a bit problematic if I had proceeded when I wanted to on my own timeline if I hadn't been forced to wait because of the friction. So it just gives you a little bit of an appreciation for friction. You're never going to have everything all planned out. You have to take actions based on the information that you know. But the friction sometimes does give you a little bit of a window to recock.
It's good insight. And so we're trying to manage with urgency our credibility. We don't want to be the person raising the alarm too often, because sometimes if you're overly sensitive to a problem and you keep bringing it up, then people start to tune you out.
Yeah, I think the key to that is the key to like almost bringing up any problem. Like, you bring it up because you have what I think is an ethical obligation to do so, and presuming like the other people are like, okay, I don't really see that as a problem and don't do anything with it, then you have to let that go until something else happens where it makes sense that you would bring it up again.
Yeah, I get that. Like the example of we started with the HR director and the maintenance director wanting the cameras.
Yes, they got the perfect piece of evidence that the cameras were necessary at that moment in time. And they, because they brought it up once and then didn't bring it up again until after that happened, they don't look like they're just hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about, we worked in an organization where they did an internal hire and for a department manager, and another department manager is like, this is going to blow up. This isn't going to work. This person can't do the job. And tried to make the case to a few of the senior leaders. And basically the senior leaders told me, like, you need to talk to her and tell her to quit. Like, it's over. We picked this person. And I had, I'd like, look, like, how many times did you bring this up? 3 times. Who'd you bring it up to? This person, this person, this person. And what happened? They picked her anyway. So you need to stop. Like, you made your point. It didn't go your way. Now let's observe. It's either going to be you were right or you weren't right, or something kind of unusual is going to happen. And we're going to have to wait and see what that is. And she was right. And it took about a year and a half for them to unwind it. It took probably a year for them to see that it wasn't going to work. And then another 6 months after that to basically figure out how they were going to move her down. They were thinking about basically a demotion, but I mean,
I know how I feel about those.
Yes, Cindi does not like demotions. Almost nobody can handle a demotion. Mm-hmm. And so it leaks out. They stop doing their extra role behaviors, which is just nerd speak for, that little extra stuff they used to do for the organization, they stopped doing. And then, not because they're bad people, but they look for ways to right the scale.
Right.
Yeah. Work less.
Right. Because they feel like they got shafted.
Yeah.
I mean, unless the only exception to that is when an employee actually comes to you and is like,
yeah, sure. They want it.
I need this to happen.
Yeah. Half the time it's because of something going on in their personal life. And so they have a face-saving way. I need this to happen. My mom got sick. I need to take care of her. I need to step back. No problem, no harm, no foul. They don't feel like they failed. Right. They feel like I had to do this. Yeah, but occasionally people will come because it's actually, they know they're not cutting it. So this topic is the subject of a lot of disagreement in organizations, or a lot of reasons why various forms of change or initiatives don't happen. It relates to urgency, can relate to seeing something early before other people are able to see it, and then it becomes a persuasive case of convincing them. It can also be because you're a little more sensitive to it because of either your vantage point or something you're going through, your experiences before. Mm-hmm. Or it can be because you're just able to put these particular pieces together in a way that other people aren't.
There are definitely differences with people and their ability to sort of, strategize, right? Like the level of which their vision goes.
Yeah.
And some people are much more tomorrow and other people are much more 3 years from now. You might even be able to put it into the terms of internal and external locus, right? Like, I think that's also a component as well.
Talking about locus of control.
Right, where, if you have an internal locus of control, you believe that you're in control of things and you can make them happen. An external locus of control is you believe that forces outside of you, God, luck, whatever.
Timing.
Yeah. That, like, you're just along for the ride. And, if you have an external locus of control, then it's very hard to get those people to have an urgency. And if you have what happens tomorrow, like, you only really see out to, like, tomorrow, which I think a lot of the time is a lot with external locus of control, which is why I wound up leaving them. You're not going to get them to see a year from now how the financial position of the place continues to erode, and it's going to be a state of urgency. It's just they're going to be more challenging groups.
Yeah.
And they exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That's a very interesting variable. We had this was a long time ago, going the Wayback Machine for this story, but one of the battalion commanders I worked for was an example of he came in and he created a sense of urgency. And in that type of organization, that's very hierarchical. If the top person thinks it should be urgent, and he was talking about like basically our performance has to improve immediately. We have to get better. And in a hierarchical organization, if the top person believes it, and I think this is even true for most companies. I mean, a new CEO convinced that we have to make change will often be able to have an excessive sway because they're the CEO, especially if they're new and they don't have the entangling relationships.
Yeah, and also because when you're new in a leader, people are actually paying attention to what you do.
Yeah.
You got a little bit of a window where they're more aware of you than later on.
Yeah. And I do think it won't work in all cases. I mean, I'm reminded of when Alan Mulally of Boeing moved to Ford Motor Company as the CEO, and he tried to create a sense of urgency, but his existing senior leaders didn't feel it. And it took a period of months for him to be able to convince them of that. Well, in the Wayback Machine, we had that happen in a battalion, the battalion commander. And there's a lot less friction in a very rigidly hierarchical organization. So everybody basically said, yes, sir. And then he overcorrected. And he fired too many lieutenants, and he went a little bit too extreme, and it ended up not working. And then somebody more stable who was smart enough to see where the problems were and strategic enough to give a little more runway to make the changes. And that person was actually extremely successful. And so in the kind of the way these things work, the one first guy who was right about the problems never made higher rank. And then the other guy ended up being a 3-star general.
Right, because he could get stuff done. I mean, one of the...
Right, but weirdly, he got less done than the first guy. The first guy got more done faster. But it was too much. And then the overcorrections. There was a damage with it. That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think from a practical standpoint with, trying to help managers manage this is, I think you can try to word it as urgency and try to get people on, like make the campaign.
Yeah.
Try to get people to agree, see if you can get the agreement. But I think a lot of the stuff that you wind up doing is like we talked about before, like maybe you're waiting for those moments to bring it back up. And I think if you really believe that it's a moment of urgency, you may, to the extent that is possible, you may start trying to move things in the direction that you think it needs to move in without wording it as urgency.
Yeah, sure. Prepping the ground.
Right, because I think to some degree when you put urgency on it, it's almost like telling somebody that they've done something wrong, right? Like the initial reaction is shock.
Yeah, sure.
And nothing is going in. And so it would be great if you could approach everybody and be like, hey, this is urgent. You see this is urgent? And they all go, yes, this is, urgent.
Right.
But that's probably actually gets you into the second case, if that does happen, But a lot of the time, I think you can sort of plant that seed, like, hey, we probably need to be moving on this. It'd be great if we had a brainstorming session about how we're going to get out of this.
Yeah.
And after that, if you don't get the support, then it's like smaller campaigns.
Yeah.
How can I move this forward? Yeah. What's in my power to actually be able to do?
Yeah.
And you're probably not wording it as urgency, so you don't get the shutdown.
Yeah.
And until something happens that supports the idea that this is urgent.
Yeah, because you can't just keep banging the drum, especially if you're not the CEO. I mean, we've had a number of cases where people just below the CEO think something is urgent that the CEO doesn't. And after multiple times getting told to like tone it down, like, cut it out, either get asked to leave or they leave out of frustration.
Right.
That's the other thing. Occasionally, I'm thinking of a small number of people. Like there's a small number of people like addicted to urgency. In the turnaround landscape, people who are good at turnaround, sometimes, they may become addicted to everything being urgent. Like, and there's a window of how long you can put people through all hands on deck. Because eventually we'll go all hands on deck, but we need to see this thing improving. And there can't be another crisis just behind this one we solved. It can't keep going like that. Right. You can't, even if you're the CEO, you can't keep persuading people. But if you're not, it's extremely dangerous territory to be pushing. By dangerous, I just mean it's very frustrating for the person who believes in the urgency to keep getting told, like, dial it back. Things aren't this urgent. And it's very problematic if you keep pushing past the point of... Well,
people just tune you out.
Unless they get upset, right?
Oh, yes, true.
Yeah, people who can tune you out, but like at some point, if you're the CEO and you have somebody who's continuously ramping up the urgency, you want the person to either cut it out or you want them to leave.
Sure.
It takes a very special person to let that kind of elevated intensity go on, because you can't, we've talked about this at length in multiple episodes. Organizations need breaks. People need breaks. And you can't just lurch from one high intensity phase of urgency to the next, without either rotating your people. You got to either do it like a hockey team where it's 5 on. I think it's 5. It's 5 on. I mean,
I don't know, you're asking the wrong person.
But you know how they do it, right? It's 5 and they're in there, and then just the whole 5. Like,
right. Everybody gets break.
That's right. I mean, that has to be the basic idea. And that's hard to do unless you're running your organization with kind of, all right, you run, all right, take a break, and then this group runs, and so forth. And there's not that much redundancy in most companies. And so you're having to actually run this organization with similar people from year to year.
Right, which means they have to have breaks.
That's right.
And the urgency person is stressful.
That's right. Yeah. And we need some of that. But
then we need a break.
That's right. There's a limit. And so there's our summary for urgency. 2 problems that are underappreciated where it comes to urgency. Problem 1, it's the beginning of a long negotiation in a lot of cases where we don't have the same urgency levels of a problem. Underappreciated problem 2 is when we do see things as high urgency, there's a tendency to overcorrect and to pile in too much at once. And the structure, the system itself, the organization, sometimes can't absorb all that. And that's why we wanted to talk about urgency today.
All right. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Management News. We appreciate likes, comments, subscriptions, stars, all the things.
All of it. All of it.
We will see you next time.
Talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast / YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Christina, Sarah, and Rebecca, and then, of course, everybody at Design at Work. And then just as a last-minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.